Hi everyone! So today I wanted to talk to you about Yae Miko, more specifically her kit, since I've been anticipating to play her ever since met her in the Archon quest, and I am now a proud Yae Miko main. Also, on a less exciting note, I've been seeing a lot of criticism flowing around about her, which... yeah, honestly, it doesn't surprise me so much since I got Kokomi on her first rerun banner back when everybody thought she sucked too. And so, I guess I'm used to this kind of stuff by now, but even so, it's still disheartening to me and it still annoys me, especially because a lot of the so-called criticism is just plain wrong. So what I wanted to do today is look at it all, talk about her benefits, talk about her weaknesses, look at all the criticism, and eventually arising with a single ultimate verdict. It's gonna be a long one. We're going to talk about her entire kit, from her normal attacks to her elemental burst. So if you guys are up to that, grab yourself a cup of tea, get comfortable, and let's get right into it. So the first thing I wanted to talk about are her normal and charged attacks. That was the first thing, like, the night I pulled for her, I went on Twitter and I already saw people complaining about it. And yeah, honestly I was surprised, and here's why. Look at this. I mean, look at it. What I saw was a very beautiful and graceful normal attack. It's flowy, it's elegant, and it's kind of playful. Basically, it fits her personality perfectly. What other people seem to see, however, slowness, bad damage, clunkiness. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about Yae Miko's flawed and slow, normal, and charged attacks. I understand that Genshin Impact is a combat-focused game. A big portion of the game is focused around fighting enemies, whether you want essential materials, artifacts, mora, whatever, domains, spiral abyss, you get it. I really don't need to explain this to you. So what I'm trying to say is, I get it. I know that combat is important. But here's the thing. Genshin Impact is also a highly visual game. Again, I ask you to look around. Look at it. It's beautiful. And more than that, Genshin Impact is also a game that is very much focused around its characters. So this leads us to a situation where Hoyoverse cannot only consider DPS when designing a character. They also need to take into account the visuals, and they need to make sure that each character's playstyle matches their personality and what they're supposed to represent. Very easy example here with Yae Miko already. Her normal attacks pay an homage to the Kagura's dance, one of the ritual dances that can be found in Shinto ceremonies. This is something Hoyoverse likes to do. They like to take cultural customs and environments from our world and bring a transformed version of that into Teyvat. So, okay, you might say, that whole paying homage to Japanese culture is nice and all, but when I'm on the battlefield, I couldn't care less that she's referencing some Shrine Maiden ceremony. I need to dish out damage, and I need to dish it out fast. And of course, that's true. Having slow attack animations isn't ideal when you're trying to clear enemies. And no matter how stunning the visuals, the combat kit still needs to be efficient to be effective. But here's the thing with Yae Miko. She's not meant to be played as an on-field DPS. Yae Miko's job is to drop her Sesshou Sakuras, disappear into the shadows, and then once her burst is ready to pop back and, you know, treat enemies to a special kind of gift. Okay, no, but to shock enemies into submission, basically. So in a way, it's like criticizing Sinch's normal attacks for being bad. Why would you do that? He's clearly meant to support your team by applying Hydro and by attacking enemies with his rain swords. Like, yeah, you can criticize his normal attacks for their low scaling, but you know it doesn't really matter. So this is where Hoyoverse, in my opinion, rightfully took some liberties with her normal and charged attacks. When you look at it, yes, you can see it as either being slow or even clunky, or you can see it as being a beautifully graceful normal and charged attack, which, realistically speaking, you're not going to use in high efficient combat where it matters. So why not look beautiful while doing it? Why not let it fit her character and her calling? Let's move on to the actual heart of her kit, which are her Sesshou Sakuras. So, if you're not familiar, Yae swishes around the battlefield and lays down usually 3, depending on how often you tap her E-skill, Sesshou Sakuras, which will then connect and periodically attack nearby enemies. Let's get the first and most annoying so-called criticism right out the way. No, her Sesshou Sakuras do not auto-attack fireplaces over enemies sometimes, or even all of the time, or even ever. They just don't do that. And here, I can prove it to you. Found a place with torches. Now we're first going to cast our shield, of course, so that Yae doesn't get hurt. And I did nerf my Yae. I gave her a very weak weapon so that she wouldn't kill the enemies immediately. Okay, look at this. What is she targeting? Oh wow, she's targeting enemies. Different enemies, but she's targeting the enemies. Now let's try to lure the enemies away. Okay, died. Very well. Okay, let's try this again. So we'll place the Sesshou Sakuras around the fire. Yeah? Who are they targeting? Oh, still the Abyss Mage. What a surprise. Now let's move far away, okay? Come on, come here, Abyss Mage. Yes, good Abyss Mage. Oh, wait. Did you see that? Yes. They targeted the torches, but only because I clearly moved out of its range. Had I stayed in the range of the Sesshou Sakuras, oh, we can try again. Oh, look, it's hitting the Abyss Mage again. See what I mean? As long as the enemies are in range of the Sesshou Sakuras will always prioritize the enemy over other objects. And the same goes for Fischl, by the way. Like, Yae isn't the only character who has auto-targeting, right? Look at Oz. He's attacking the Abyss Mage. Now let's try to, move away before. Oh no! Did you see that? Did you see that? They were targeting the torches after we moved out of their range. Okay, so as you can see, it's not correct. That being said, there is one domain where the auto attack from the Sakuras does not work, which is Dvalin's. This is less Yae Miko's flaw though, since Fischl's Oz can't target Dvalin either. Looks like that particular domain is faulty and not Yae Miko. It's actually kind of heartbreaking because I see it brought up so often in all of the comments by people who don't even have Yae Miko. They'll write stuff like, oh yeah, I'm so glad I didn't pull for Yae Miko because Genshin really needs to fix her auto-targeting. And I'm like, there's nothing to fix. She's fine. She does her job fine. The Sesshou Sakuras always hit enemies over inanimate objects, or even cats and even dogs. This is a non-issue. Cool. Okay, one myth debunked. Let's move on to the next one. The next so-called problem that a lot of bigger content creators especially have raised is that the Sesshou Sakuras take up a lot of time to place. Now, from a speedrunning perspective, or even the perspective of a whale who pops Menet's ult, pops Kazuo's ult, and then uses Raiden Shogun's ult, and basically everything dies, I can understand that. I can understand that putting up the Sesshou Sakuras takes time. But here's the thing. Not everything is about speedrunning, and not everything is about just obliterating domains and enemies as quickly as you can. And I think we tend to forget that when we watch bigger content creators who are hyper-focused on damage and use the same 2 broken teams over and over so that they don't have to deal with the mechanics of the game, basically. Now, I'll admit, I don't own a team that can clear a domain in under 10 seconds, and honestly, that's kind of my point. Most players neither have the time nor the means to invest an exorbitant amount of time and money into the game so that they can eventually speedrun everything in an instance. And even if we could, it doesn't take away from the fact that I kind of like spending a little time on the battlefield. I like testing out different team comms, and I like using my own skills to, dodge enemies and attack them correctly, to have a more complete gameplay experience. And I don't think that's so crazy to say. Plus, it's not even as though Yae Miko's E-skill setup takes up more time than any other characters. If you use supports that need to absorb energy after casting their E-skill, like Xingqiu or Rosaria, you know that it takes up some time as well. But the payoff is worth it, which is why we usually don't complain about it. I wonder why the same courtesy cannot be extended to Yae Miko. So, when you consider all of that, I think it just comes down to taste. personal preference. Some players love Yae Miko's playstyle, me included. We find the gameplay very fun and refreshing. Placing your turrets feels like you're dancing across the battlefield. But I completely understand that for some players, it's just not their cup of tea, and that is fine. But I don't think this is one thing where we can criticize a character on. Like, apart from the fact that a character's value should never just be determined by how well they can speedrun through content, it also in this case just boils down to subjective playstyle preferences, where a right and wrong doesn't really exist. Just a for me or a not for me, and that's okay. So, moving on, but staying with her E-skill, let's talk about a major criticism, which is that her Sesshou Sakuras do not grant you an invincibility frame. And this is actually a criticism that I believe has some merit to it. I mean, let's look at her E-skill. You press it, which makes you move from one point to another. And while you're moving from point A to point B, Yae becomes invisible for a very brief moment. So it feels right, intuitive even, for her to have an invincibility frame at that moment, no? Earlier I mentioned that her kit reflects her personality, and this would have been an opportunity to let it match up even more. Being elusive and untouchable for that very small window would fit Yae Miko nicely. But more importantly, I think, is that the motion just feels very intuitive to us players. I don't know about you, but even after I knew that casting her E-skill doesn't grant me an invincibility frame, I still often pressed it to dodge enemies. Because for one, it felt right, and because using new methods to dodge enemy attacks is much more fun. I'm kind of tired of always using a quick dash to iframe attacks. But there is another side to the argument, which is why I find myself kind of in the middle of this whole debate. See, the criticism of her E-skill not granting you an invincibility frame only works if you haven't really grasped the correct way to play her. Her E-skill has two major benefits, and in many respects, they're unique to the game. First one is spacing. See, the whole crux of Yae Miko's kit is to move around seamlessly and let you use the battlefield as part of your combat strategy. She enables you now to engage the arena that you have in front of yourself when you enter a domain or the spiral abyss in a much more significant way than before. Like, don't get me wrong, that door of using your surroundings to your benefit when fighting enemies was always there and open, but Yae Miko is the one who really pushes it wide open. As of right now, Yae Miko is the only character who can not only move around without consuming stamina, but also dodge enemies while attacking them. Talk about efficiency! Missing an archer in your team while a rune guard starts spinning towards you? No problem, just escape him with Yae Miko and kill him in the same instance. 2 birds, 1 Miko. When you play as Yae Miko, proper spacing and understanding enemies' movements and the arena you're in become crucial to getting the most out of her. The fact that she can be harmed while casting her E-skill is less of an oversight on Hoyoverse's part and more of a feature to help you keep the proper amount of distance between yourself and the enemy. If you want to learn more about why Yae doesn't need to have an invincibility frame during her E-skill, I suggest you check out Kokomi Clan's video on her kit. They have a number of valuable videos not only on Yae, but on understanding Genshin better as a whole, so I really cannot recommend them enough. And since we're already here talking about her amazing E-skill, let's talk about the second benefit, which is that her turrets put out a consistent amount of electro damage. That's not only great for the obvious, which is consistent damage, of course, but for making elemental reaction teams shine, whether that's electrocharged, overload, or superconduct team with a physical DPS. Yae's turrets are the perfect enablers for all of that. And yes, they are far more consistent than Fischl's Oz. So, maybe we can talk a little less about issues that aren't really issues, and more about her unique benefits? I don't know, feels reasonable to me. So, before we move on to her burst, which also managed to garner a lot of criticism, I want to talk about something that actually annoys me with her Sesshou Sakuras, genuinely. And I would really love for Hoyoverse to fix that. Or really to change it, because it's not really a bug, more like an oversight on their part. And that is that Yae Miko is not a very open world, co-op friendly character. If you want to play together with your friends as Yae Miko in the open world, you're gonna have a bad time, because as of right now, Genshin only allows you to place down 3 Sesshou Sakuras at once. Which means if you have 2 Yae Mikos, you're going to be constantly erasing 1 Sesshou Sakura when you dance around the battlefield and do your thing. And honestly, I don't understand why that is. it can't really be about dealing too much damage, since any two characters can exist at the same time in the open world. You can have 2, 3, even 4 Raidens or Eulas all at once without having any problems. Couldn't they have just adjusted her E-skill to deal less damage in such situations, as they did with other characters' damage scaling? Maybe you, smart viewer, have an answer to that mystery. If so, please drop a comment. I'm genuinely curious what the cap on her Sesshou Sakuras is all about. So, let's move on to Yae Miko's burst. The biggest issue I see people decrying is that Yae Miko's burst cost is much too high, and therefore she has energy problems. And that perspective already takes you away from an objective assessment. Like, fact of the matter is, her burst cost is 90. Not so much a fact is, she has energy problems. What I really mean by that is, every character needs to be managed, and if you manage them correctly, their kit is less of a problem and more of a frame you have to work with. And the very same goes for Yae Miko. Personally, I never ran into energy problems with her. And why is that? Because I was conscious of the fact that her burst cost is 90, and I made sure to use the appropriate artifact substats, the appropriate weapons, and most importantly, using the appropriate team comms to make that work. And while yes, this might sound very restrictive the way I'm putting it right now, it really isn't. At least it's not for me. For example, I don't have Raiden yet, just you wait, Shogun, and it took me a while to get official. And even before that, like, running Yae was totally fine. I didn't have any issues. This seems like one of those concerns people have, again, that don't have Yae. They see the 90 burst cost and get intimidated by it because it looks high and because they don't understand how to use Yae properly. Her burst not only costs 90, but she also has a 22 seconds cooldown. Why? To not mess with your team rotations. Usually it's recommended to rely on her Sesshou Sakuras to deal the most damage, so the burst cooldown she has seems reasonable to me. And of course, there's that extra little benefit on her high burst cost working extremely well with Raiden to build Resolve. I know, it's not the cheapest synergy, like, it's 2 limited 5 stars that work well together, but I'm really into that sort of thing. I love the fact that Raiden Shogun and Yae Miko work so well together considering their close ties in Genshin lore. So yeah, I don't really have much to add to these things. I don't really do much math on these things, so I'm not claiming that her burst cost and cooldown has the perfect duration and the perfect cost. All I'm saying is that I am very content by the way it is right now, and that I personally haven't run into any issues. But of course, that could look different for other people's accounts and other people's Yaes, so that's really just my perspective. Okay. There's one last thing I'd like to discuss because there's a thing about her burst that I think could be optimized, and I'm curious to hear if you agree with me on that. Before we discuss that, let me first talk to you about what I love about her burst. So, do you know those Genshin characters' bursts in real life videos on YouTube? I love them. They're so fun to watch, they crack me up every time, but when I watched the one on Yae Miko, I did laugh. I was like, oh my god, that's literally it. That is what Hoyoverse wanted to do, which is, as you can see right now, a fox hunting for mice. It's pouncing into its enemy. Yeah, I just love how Yae Miko's kit fits her character and her being a kitsune perfectly. As discussed, her normal attacks reference her being a Guji Yae, head of the Divine Ceremonial Affairs in Inazuma. Next to her E-skill is an embodiment of the fact that Yae likes to lay traps, whether those are for the people she converses with or the enemy she fights in combat. Oh, and they're a testament to her not deigning to deal with things that she regards too tedious for herself. She puts down her Sesshou Sakuras and vanishes away, only to pounce and strike with her burst at the precise moment when her victims entered the trap. I just really wanted to highlight that point about her because to me, that is such an important part of a good character design, and I think they did a good job with her. All that being said, I think it's too bad, especially considering her high burst cost, that her thunderstrikes do not follow the enemy. What do I mean by that? If you look and see here, I use the burst and, oh, look at that, the enemy moved. The second and third thunderstrikes were for nothing. We lost out on a significant portion of our damage. This isn't a problem, of course, with larger and more stationary enemies, but with other smaller, more mobile enemies, especially with the samurai, this can happen, and I think it's too bad. Of course, learning the enemy's attack patterns and familiarizing yourself with Yae's correct playstyle reduces missed thunderstrikes. The longer I have her, the less I miss. But still, there's always some RNG to it, and so while I am a fan of having to think when using a character and honing your skills, I think in this case, her burst is unbalanced. Considering that it has a 90 burst cost, that it takes a couple of seconds to fully unfold, and that it does deal a significant portion of her damage. So, how could this be fixed? Well, I think a good middle ground would be to let the thunderstrikes follow enemies around if the first one hits them. That way, no matter where the enemy moves to, they are still hit by the subsequent thunderbolts. I think that would be fair and it would work really well. But I don't know, you might disagree, and I'd be curious to know why. Phew! So, I said everything I wanted to say about Yae Miko. My god, this was a long one, but hey, we had a lot to cover. So yeah, as you know now, I'm very content with how she turned out. I think she's super fun. If I had to sum up her kit in 3 words, it would be graceful, playful, and absolutely useful. So yeah. And now, if you're still here, I would love to hear from you. Do you agree with my point of view, or do you agree with the criticisms, or are you somewhere in between? Definitely let me know in the comments below. I would really love to hear your opinions. And hey, while you're at it, maybe give me a like and subscribe as well. Again, if you made it to the end, wow, kudos to you. Until then, I hope you all stay safe. Have fun with Genshin. Good luck with your pulling. Good luck with your saving, whatever you do. Whatever you do, I hope you're well. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye!